was 25 years old, I was desperate to move out of my house. Most of my friends were either in college or have moved somewhere else. I was still living at home with my parents, and sometimes I wondered if living under a bridge would be better. Obviously, I knew it wouldn't, but that's how badly I needed and wanted my own space. I was checking online for listings, and I found a bunch of places in my area to rent on the Facebook Marketplace. I couldn't believe how easy it is to rent a place in this time that we live in. Being young and stupid and probably a little naive, I found a listing on Marketplace that was the definition of too good to be true. It was an entire 2-story house with 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garage, and a finished basement. The pictures made this place look incredible. I messaged the guy, and since I was so eager, I asked if we could meet when I left work that night at 8 p.m. He agreed, and I was already mentally planning my setup for the house. After work, when I was driving over, it dawned on me that out of all the pictures, there wasn't any outside of the house or the finished basement. I didn't really think too much about it, but the thought did cross my mind. I pulled into the house at around 8:15, and the outside looked a little rough, and the neighborhood didn't seem ideal, but I was ignoring all that because I kept telling myself that this was an entire house just for me. I knocked on the front door, and this sort of disheveled man answered the door. I walked in, and the pictures didn't really look like the house at all. The inside looked old, and honestly, the more I looked at it, it looked like it was falling apart. I was standing in the living room with this strange man, and also standing in there was a frail-looking woman. She was so skinny that it looked like her shirt was practically falling off of her shoulder. I felt in situations like this, the person renting the house or trying to sell the house would walk you around or show you the interior. But these two people sort of just stood there. The guy finally mumbled something like, "Yeah, so, this is it. I should have said on the listing, but it's cash only." I asked if I could look around, and he looked kind of annoyed, but accepted. I looked into one of the rooms on the main floor and saw that the place was completely dilapidated. I knew I didn't want the place anymore, and I didn't need to look at the rest of the house. I walked back into the living room and just said to the guy, "Hey, thanks for meeting me, man, but unfortunately, I'm gonna have to pass." The woman looked like she was going to cry, and the man said, "I know it needs a little work, but you should see the basement." The woman ran over to the door and opened it. She held her arms out, pointing to the basement as if presenting me with some sort of prize. Since I'd had a really hard time saying no, I walked over and stood on top of the stairs. I was thinking, no way, as soon as I looked into the darkness at the bottom, and I could hear the man say to me, "The light switch is downstairs, just go down and we'll be right behind you." The woman put her hand on my shoulder and just sort of lightly started to nudge me. I guess that was all I needed to push me in the right direction to get out of there. I turned around and started walking toward the door and thanked them for their time. Well, the guy didn't like that. He seemed to run over and stood in front of the door. The already creepy and disheveled man now looked even more unsettling. He was staring at me with these sort of bulbous eyes and started to reach into his back pocket. And as he stared directly into my eyes, he said, "You said you wanted a place. Pay up, or you're not leaving." I lied and I told him I didn't have the money. He started to walk toward me and seemed to size me up. I could see in my peripheral vision that the woman was moving closer behind me. The man started to struggle to grab whatever he was concealing in his back pocket, and I used this opportunity and reacted instantly. I ran through the guy and towards the door. When I went to open it, I noticed that it was locked. This guy must have locked the door when I wasn't looking. I hurried and unlocked the door and just made a mad dash for my car. And I heard that woman screaming from the inside and the man seemingly running after me. As I started to drive away, I could see that he was standing at the bottom of the driveway. Thank Christ, I never saw any sort of car pursue me. I don't think these two had a car, if I'm being honest. I was so terrified that I didn't drive home that night, and feeling a sense of urgency and concern for my safety, I immediately went to the nearest police station to report the incident. Now, the officers listened attentively to my account and assured me that they would look into the matter. They decided to visit the house, but apparently upon their arrival, The couple was nowhere to be found. It appeared that they were squatters or had hastily vacated the premises before the police arrived. And although I never discovered their true intentions, I was relieved that they weren't there anymore. And the police assured me that they would keep an eye on the area and encouraged me to reach out if I encountered any further issues. All I know is that I'm never looking on Facebook Marketplace for a place to rent ever again. The events of this story took place just a few days ago, so they're still fresh in my mind. I suppose this story is more creepy and just flat out weird than scary, but the more I sit and reflect on it, the more I think to myself that this could have turned into a real nightmare. Just a little backstory first. I worked as sort of a freelance camera operator. Local artists, students, and even just random people hire me to record content for them. I have done everything from documentaries to weddings, and I even shot a short film about aliens for some guy. I'm not rich, but I make enough to pay my bills, and I get to do what I love. About a week ago, I got into a car accident though, and my car was completely totaled. Now on a side note, that was horrifying and could be its own story. An old lady fell asleep behind the wheel, crossed over the median, and hit me head on. The fear of seeing a car coming directly at you at full speed was one of the worst things I'd ever witnessed. Fortunately for me, that story ends there, and the old woman and I were left completely unharmed, thank God. However, my camera would not be so lucky. Along with my car being totaled, my camera was destroyed in the accident. When the woman hit me, due to the impact, the camera flew off my passenger seat and went right through the windshield. I ended up crying about my camera and not the car. The accident was on a Wednesday and I needed a camera for Saturday for a job that I was doing. I started to text everyone I knew to see if I could borrow a camera, but nobody had a camera that I could use. I thought that maybe I could use my iPhone camera, but I knew that that would prove to be more trouble than it was worth. One of the people I texted told me to check Facebook Marketplace. I loved the idea and was surprised that I didn't think about it sooner. I couldn't believe all the stuff that I was finding there. I was trying to focus on the one thing that I needed, which was the camera, and I eventually found a guy named Devin who was selling a camera that was nicer than mine and a microphone to go with it, which I didn't own at the moment. He was asking for $100 for all of it, so I felt like I couldn't resist that offer. I told him I needed it right away, and he agreed to let me come pick it up right after we messaged back and forth. I didn't feel weird and sketchy about any of this. He lived in a fancy building downtown in one of those luxury apartments. Also, it was early afternoon, so I wasn't worried about meeting some strange person at night. I borrowed my mom's car and drove to the apartment. The guy lived on the 12th floor of the apartment all the way at the end of the hall. I remember staring out of the window at the end of the hall for a minute or two before I knocked on his door. When I knocked, he answered right away, almost creepily fast. It was like he was standing there waiting for a minute. I walked in and he seemed like an alright guy. He was good looking and was dressed in really nice clothes. He was tall and had the whitest teeth I'd ever seen in a person. We made small talk for a little while, talking about cameras and what I did for a living. He then went on to tell me that he did some acting for a while and that he made most of his money as a model. I was interested, so I was genuinely listening to the guy. Finally, he walked over to a room on the far side of the apartment and said in a very calming voice, "Okay, well, the camera's in here, let me grab it for you." As he was entering the room, he stopped for a second and turned back to me and said, "You know, being a camera geek like me, I think you'd love to see my new camera setup. Come check it out while I pack up the other camera and everything else for you." If you're listening to this, you may be wondering how I could be so stupid to follow a stranger into a small room. Well, the answer: this guy totally disarmed me. He gave me no red flags or any other indication that he might be a sketchy person. So I followed this guy into his room and shut the door behind me, and this was the first indication that something was wrong. Then I looked at the room. There was nothing in there except a camera and a tripod. In an extremely creepy voice, he said, "You know, you'd make a great model." I didn't answer him. I just turned around, opened the door, and left the room. Then I ran and left the apartment without the camera he was allegedly selling. He didn't pursue me, and he didn't message me again. That was the end of that encounter, so I realized that nothing technically happened to me, but once that door shut behind me, and he was standing over me, I knew something wasn't right. As the days continue to roll on past this afternoon, I keep wondering to myself, what if I didn't leave? Was this guy just some creep or a genuinely weird guy? I had no reason to call the authorities since, like I said, nothing happened, but I worry that some other woman may fall into the same trap. I noticed that the posting is now gone, obviously, and it hasn't been put back on Marketplace yet. I went and picked up another camera from an older guy the next day, and I made sure that I went with a friend of mine this time, just in case. If I ever see that guy again, I'm running as far as I can in the opposite direction. Going through a hard breakup can make you do some things you're not proud of. For a lot of people, it's going out and meeting someone to rebound, which is never a good thing. For some people, you can meet a rebound without even realizing it, and that's what's happened to me about a year ago. I was with my ex for 6 years when we finally broke up. It hit me pretty hard, and I was struggling for a little bit. We bought a house together, but she kept the house. I honestly didn't want to stay there since it just depressed me being there. And so, with my now limited funds, I found myself a cheap place to rent until I could get on my feet and afford a nicer spot. I literally let her keep everything when we broke up, so I didn't have really anything to my name. I found a month-to-month place to rent on Marketplace, and that's when I realized that there was a ton of stuff on Marketplace to actually buy. I bought a couch, a recliner, a TV, and anything you could really think of, and I felt like a king saving all this money. The one thing I didn't have, though, was tables and chairs, which made it sort of hard to have people over to either play games or just even eat food. I found this girl, we'll call her Leah, who was selling a table and chairs, and they looked nice and in great shape, so I messaged her. Now, long story short, I went and looked at the tables and chairs, and they were beautiful. While I was there loading up the chairs in my truck, I started talking to her, and it turned out she also just went through a horrible breakup, and she was just unloading a bunch of stuff. Well, our small talk turned into 2 hours of laughing and joking in her driveway. We ended up exchanging numbers and set up a little date to go out and grab a drink that weekend. I was excited about this since I felt some sort of connection with her. Well, the date went well, and we went back to her place after the bar. That night led to several more dates, and before I knew it, I was seeing this girl on a regular basis. About a month later, I noticed some weird things happening. I would go to the bathroom and my phone would just be in different places, or my computer screen, which was idle, was now turned on. I figured that she was trying to snoop, which honestly I had nothing to hide, so I really didn't push it and just shrugged it off. I figured she would realize quickly that I wasn't hiding anything and she would just eventually stop going through my stuff. One night, we started hanging out after we both got home from work. I could tell that she was upset, so I asked her what was going on. She told me that she saw that I had been texting my ex and was worried that I was going to go back to her. For context, I texted my ex asking her if she received my doctor's bill in the mail since I hadn't received it yet, and she responded by saying, "No, I'll let you know if it shows up." And that was the end of the conversation. I wasn't mad, though. I understand that some people have severe trust issues and how that can be tough. I thought I explained it well to her that I wasn't mad and that she could always talk to me about this stuff. And the rest of the night was fine. The next Saturday, she stayed over at my place. We fell asleep at about midnight. I woke up a little after 3 in the morning, and she was standing on my bed, on top of me. Literally standing on the bed, not the ground. She was holding one of my golf clubs above her head, with both hands firmly on the club. I instantly bolted up, put my hands up, and slid into an upright position. I asked her what was going on and if she was all right, and she was practically sobbing. I could barely understand her at first, and then she was able to get the words out as she said, "I know you're hiding something. Where is it?" And I truly had no idea what she was talking about. I slid out of bed while she was still sobbing, and thankfully she caught me just a second too late, and she struck the club down and missed me by just a few inches. I ran out into the living room and I couldn't believe my eyes. She'd torn up my home. And I mean ripped the pillows open, knocked over bookshelves, and went through all the cabinets in the kitchen. My computer was open and I could see tons of tabs open. I started to get livid because of all the stuff she had ruined. She came out of the bedroom, and no golf club in hand, but she still was bawling. She was begging me to forgive her and claiming that she didn't mean to destroy everything. And then, like the flip of a switch, the tears and sobbing turned into anger, and she started to yell, saying, "I'm just so hurt about Nicole." And I'm sure I looked confused since I had no idea who Nicole is or who she was talking about. And I tried to defend myself, but she just kept yelling that she knew about Nicole. She's seen everything. And then, with almost no notice, she charged me and pulled out some sort of knife from her waistband. Thankfully, I am a bigger guy and I was able to hold her back until I could reach the door. And once I got to the door, I ran as fast as I could to the local corner store, which was open 24 hours. I immediately told them to call the police, which thank God they did, and the police showed up pretty quickly. I explained to them everything, and this whole ordeal ended up just being a bigger nightmare. It turns out that Leah was unfortunately not well, obviously. I'm not exactly sure what she ended up being diagnosed with, but I was really sad for her. She is a sweet girl, and I hope she ended up getting the help she needed. I hadn't seen or heard from her since that night, and I still think about that night a lot. The memory of her standing over top of me is something I'll never forget, and ever since I bought that table from her, I haven't used Facebook Marketplace, and honestly, I don't think I ever will again. After graduating from college, I recently moved to a new town and I'm still trying to get settled in. I got a job at this local market basically unloading trucks. It pays decent and it's just a placeholding job until I can get another job in my field. More than anything, I like the scenery of the surrounding area of my job. The building is located right on the side of a lake, so when we're outside unloading trucks, I at least get to stare at the beautiful lake. When I moved here, I really didn't take much since I'm only in a small studio apartment. I have recently started picking things up every week to make my little apartment feel more like home. The one thing I don't have, and I severely underestimated the price, was a stand for my TV. Right now I have my 60-inch TV on the ground, and it looks sort of ridiculous. My friend from work told me to check out the Facebook Marketplace, and I gotta be honest, I was a bit on the fence. I remember growing up and everyone was talking about how sketchy places like Craigslist were, and I just assumed Marketplace was the new version of that. The friend who told me about Marketplace showed me a whole bunch of pictures on his phone of stuff that he bought on Marketplace for cheap. Basically, he got an entire living room set in perfect condition for $100. He explained to me that a lot of people are always looking to get rid of stuff, and sometimes they'll basically give it away for next to nothing. We searched for TV stands, and I was excited to see all the stands on Marketplace for way cheaper than I was expecting. The first one I clicked on, I loved. The stand was specifically for a 60-inch TV, and the woman listing it said that she needed to get rid of it right away because she's moving at the end of the month. She was only asking for $25 for this beautiful wooden stand. I understand for most this may be a red flag, but because I was listening to everyone tell me how good the deals were out there, I just assumed this was normal. I didn't even bother looking at this woman's profile or any information, just the contact information in the post. I messaged her and got a response back within a few minutes. We exchanged some messages talking about the stand, and I told her that I wanted it, and this is where things started to get a little weird. Our schedules didn't line up, and she told me that she only had a few more days to get rid of the stand. I told her that I worked Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., but she worked from 2 p.m. to midnight, and I wasn't going to drive 30 minutes away at midnight when I have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning for work. She then suggested to me that she could meet me at the lake next to my job at 5 a.m. before I start work. Not far from where I work is a parking lot where you could park if you wanted to walk the various trails around the lake. We agreed to meet there at 5 the next day, and I would purchase the stand. I felt a little bad about making her do this when I wouldn't make the late-night trip to see her, but she claimed that she didn't mind and was willing to do whatever she needed to do to get rid of this stand. I was just happy to finally get my TV off the ground. The next morning was one of those damp and foggy mornings. If it wasn't for the fact that I was getting my TV stand, I would have probably hit the snooze like 2 or 3 times. I pulled into the parking lot of the lake just a few minutes before 5. I parked right in the center of the big parking lot and pulled out my phone. I sent her a message saying that I was here and just to message me whenever she got there, no hurry. A few minutes later, I got a message from her. It said something like, "Sorry, I'm just seeing this. I'm already here, actually. I'm in the van parked by the big tree in the corner." I looked all around, and sure enough, in the back corner of the parking lot was a van. It was so dark at this time of the morning that I didn't even notice the van when I pulled in. I started to drive over, and as my headlights were illuminating the van, I realized that there was nobody inside the van. I stopped my car, still quite a bit of a distance between us, and I messaged her saying, "Hey, there's no one in the van. Are you sure this is you?" And she responded right away and said, "Yeah, I'm in the back of the van getting it ready. Just pull up next to the van and open the back hatch." Something felt very wrong and off about all of this. I slowly pulled up next to the van, but didn't get out. I kept my doors locked and my car running. She messaged me again, "Aren't you going to get out?" I didn't respond. I started to reverse so that my headlights were hitting the windshield of the van. I clearly noticed that there was no one inside the van. No lights at all were on inside that van, and I couldn't understand why she wouldn't just get out. Instead of trying to figure this out more, I decided to drive away. I looked in my rearview mirror, and behind the trees next to the van, I saw 2 people emerge. They had something in their hands, but I couldn't tell what it was since it was so dark. I didn't drive to work just yet and drove to a local gas station to get coffee. I was shaking because the gravity of what had happened just started to set in. While I was sitting in my car in that gas station parking lot, I got a message from that woman again that said, "Good call, bro." I tried to inform the police, but I saw that the listing was gone and so was that profile. They did take all my information, so I'm not sure if there was a way that they can find this seller. I was terrified for days, and I'm still pretty freaked out. I swear I thought I saw that van following me about a week ago, but I'm sure it was just my paranoia. I realized I'm lucky I made it out unharmed, but it did make me realize just how quickly something horrible can happen if you're not paying attention. Be careful meeting anyone online because there are some truly evil people out there. I have been dating my boyfriend now for over 4 years. We'll get married eventually, but we're waiting until we both finish school. The first year we were dating, my boyfriend and his little sister tragically lost their parents. And for their sake, I won't go into details. But ever since then, my boyfriend has assumed responsibility for his sister. Since he's 28 and she's only 16, he's been sort of a father figure and mentor to her for the last couple of years. She's a great kid, but given her age, she had an extremely hard time coping, and I could never blame her for that. Since we've been together for so long now, I try to give his sister guidance when I can and help out to create a loving household. Since we're all students, we often stretch our budget as much as we can. When she turned 16, all she wanted to do was get her permit so she could get her license. We did everything we could to make that happen, and even though she eventually got her license, unfortunately we couldn't afford to get her a car just yet. So I started saving a little money from every check, and so did my boyfriend. Eventually we had a couple of $1,000s on the side, and we were planning on buying a car for her birthday. I know it wouldn't be a great car, but I bet it would be nicer than the car that I got when I was 16. He suggested looking on Facebook Marketplace, which seemed like a great idea. Tons of garbage vehicles and a few nice ones, but when we inquired about the decent cars, they were either sold or we didn't get a response back. Finally, after about a week of trying to get at least a message back, a guy named Howard messaged me about the 2013 Chevy Cruze for $2,100. The pictures made this car look pristine, and Howard told us in the message that the car runs great and that it was his stepmother's car, and she moved out of state. He told us that she told him to sell all of her stuff that she didn't need, and they'll split the profits 50-50. I didn't care about any of that as long as they sold me a working car for my future sister-in-law. We set up a time to meet, and if we liked the car, we told him that we would buy it that day. He told us to come over after 8 p.m. since that's when he'll be out of work. That worked out well for us since we both had class during the day anyway. Obviously, we didn't tell his sister, and she was at a friend's house anyway, so that night we made the drive to go see the car. It was kind of far away, but we really didn't care. If the car was as good as the guy said, then we would have driven over an hour if we needed to. We got to the address that he gave, and it was nearly pitch black. The house was in the middle of nowhere, and it looked completely abandoned, if I'm being honest. I mean, there were boards in the windows. Clearly no one lived there, but my boyfriend can be a complete idiot sometimes. I told him that I didn't think that we were in the right place, and he told me that he thought we were, and maybe this guy is just super poor. I messaged Howard and said, "Hey, we're here, I think. It doesn't look like anyone else is here, though." About a minute later, he responded saying, "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm just finishing up getting the title for the car and everything. Come on inside, and I'll take you out back to see the car." I told my boyfriend that I didn't like this, and it seemed weird. He just always wants to see the good in people and told me not to worry. I begged him not to go inside, but he didn't listen. He told me to stay in the car if I didn't feel safe, so that's exactly what I did. When he got up to the door and walked in, I did see a faint light coming from inside, which helped me feel a little bit better. I got out of the car and moved to the driver's seat. I wanted to be able to drive away as fast as possible in case something wasn't actually right. And while I was getting into the car, I heard yelling coming from the house, and the sort of loud thud, like the sound of something breaking. I froze, just staring at the dark house, and seconds later, my boyfriend ran outside. He was screaming for me to drive, and that memory of him screaming for his life still cuts me inside and makes me sick. He basically dove into the passenger seat as 4 men ran out of the house. My boyfriend wasn't saying anything other than screaming the word "drive, drive," and I drove extremely fast in this rural area until we finally got into a more suburban part of town. And he finally started to catch his breath, and that's when he told me what happened. He said he walked in, and before he could even get any words out, someone hit him over the head with something, and he said he instinctively turned around and pushed someone to the ground, and that was the loud thud that I heard. He said that he instantly ran to the car. He said he didn't even realize that there was more than one guy until he saw all 4 of them come out of the house as we drove off. Obviously, that post was removed, and we really had no proof of anything. We did have a couple of screenshots of the car, but the license plate wasn't in the screenshot, and most likely the picture was a fake anyway. We still reported this, obviously, but nothing ever happened. It gives me nightmares thinking about the possibility of how many times this worked. I always hoped that nobody would fall for this trick, but I'm not that naive. All I can hope is that somehow, some way, these horrible people were caught, and nobody else has to endure the same nightmare that we did, or even worse. Breakups suck. We all know it. Not long ago, I broke up with my ex of nearly 10 years. It was over long before then, but I have a hard time ending things. She's a sensitive person, and whenever the subject of ending it came up over the years, well, let's just say that she would go into shutdown mode. I realized prolonging the relationship was making it worse, but I didn't understand that at the time. I also want to mention, to protect everyone's privacy, that I won't be using names or locations in the story. I'm still close with the family, and they've already dealt with enough in their life, and I don't want to bring more stress in there. When I finally ended it for good, it went about as well as you can imagine. She took it horribly, and it was a few rough weeks of fighting, crying, and even some threats, but eventually, the split was final. She moved in with her aunt, who lived about an hour away, I think, but I'm not exactly sure. Since I stayed in the house, I ended up giving her a lot of the furniture, which was fine with me. I make decent enough money that I could afford new couches and whatnot. I planned on going to one of the big chains to get all of my new furniture, but in the short term, I needed something in my house to sit on since I was watching TV in a lawn chair. I looked on Marketplace to see if I could find anyone who was just trying to get rid of some furniture. What I found was this super ugly yellow love seat. I know that sounds disgusting, but I have this weird fascination with the color yellow, so I was all about it. But the most exciting thing to me was that the woman was selling it for $40, and it looked like it had never been sat on before. I messaged the woman and set up a time to come see the love seat. She lived about 40 minutes away, but I didn't mind the drive. I drove out to the small house that sat in a sort of semi-secluded area. I knocked on the door and an elderly woman answered. I told her that I was there for the love seat, and she looked scared. She screamed that she didn't know who I was or what I was talking about, and she slammed the door in my face. I went back to my car and checked the address in my messages. This was clearly the address, so I messaged her and told her that I was there, but a woman closed the door on me. This woman responded several minutes later and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, that's my grandmother. I live in the garage out back. Just walk out back and come on in." I was a little annoyed, but I wanted that love seat, so I made my way to the garage that was in the backyard, as she said. I knocked on the door, and the sort of muffled voice responded saying, "Come in." So I walked in and looked around, but I didn't see a love seat, and in fact, the inside was just a normal garage. I shouted hello, but I didn't hear an answer. And just as I was about to leave from an adjacent room, a small person seemed to charge me. This figure had enough of a surprise start on me that she was able to jump on me, knocking me off my feet. She was wearing something on her head, and it was dark in the garage, so I wasn't able to see her face. She was yelling and screaming, and finally whatever it was came off. And I saw. It was my ex-girlfriend. I'm not even joking. I was so flabbergasted, and I was able to push her off, and instead of running, I just got up and started yelling at her. Her tone changed instantly from erratic to crying her eyes out. I went over to try and console her, even though I was furious and very, very confused. She was uncontrollably crying. I was trying to calm her down, and that's when it happened. She pulled out like some box cutter or something like that, and just cut my shoulder. In that moment, I screamed, wincing in pain, and ripped the small blade out of my shoulder and just threw it to the ground. I started to howl, and in the 10 years of knowing this woman, I'd never seen her act or sound like this. She grabbed the blade off the ground and started to slash the air in front of me. I think she was trying to make contact with me, but in between all of her sobs, she was just thankfully unsuccessful. I was able to get to my feet, running to my vehicle screaming, and I called the police right away and informed them of what had happened. They showed up pretty quickly, and thank God she was arrested. Getting attacked was horrifying, but watching someone I care about be taken away by the police was incredibly traumatic. The woman I watched get put in the back of the police car was not the same woman I used to love. I still can't believe her plan actually worked. There was no guarantee that I would ever check Marketplace for furniture, but I did. She knew I would be attracted to this ugly yellow couch if I did, and she was right. She told me that she was moving in with her aunt, which was true. Her aunt lived several houses down from that poor elderly woman who had to deal with the fallout of all this nonsense. And the last thing I knew was that she was being moved somewhere to get treatment. I decided not to press criminal charges, and I'm even helping with some of her medical bills. Sometimes it's the people closest to us that can cause us the most harm. I don't know what clicked off in her brain that made attacking me seem like some sort of solution. I feel terrible for her, and I truly hope that she gets all the help that she needs. For anonymity, I'm going to leave out some details from my story that I'm sharing with all of you. All my wife wanted for her 31st birthday was to go on her favorite country artist's summer tour. The average ticket price for even mediocre seats seemed to be over $200, which was surprising to me. I didn't go to many concerts, but I thought it would be cheaper than that. Anyway, I got lucky, and the tour was coming pretty close to our hometown, and I knew that it would be the perfect gift. The tickets were going to be on sale on a Tuesday, and since I was working, I was going to get online and grab them after work. Well, again, my ignorance of the concert scene came into play, and the show sold out almost immediately, and I saw that there was absolutely nothing available when I got home from work. I was texting with one of my buddies, and he told me that I could look on the secondary market for seats, but I would probably have to pay an upcharge. I was excited that there was still a chance, though. I began scrolling through the main sites, StubHub, Vivid Seats, and all those others. After limited success, I switched gears and began looking at Craigslist and Facebook groups and markets to see if I could find anything from a local seller. I sent a few messages out but hadn't really received responses, and the ones that did respond were increasing the price after every message, it seemed like. As the days and weeks rolled on, though, I was getting ready to give up, until I found someone selling 2 tickets for what seemed to be a reasonable price. Their name was Victor, and he had the tickets listed on Facebook Marketplace. I messaged him in a hurry, praying that they were still available. I didn't receive a response in the next half hour or so, and I assumed that they were most likely spoken for. I decided to get some sleep and just went to bed, pretty disappointed. However, when I got up for work the next morning, I had a message from that Victor. He sent the message at around 4 a.m. and said that the tickets were still available. I was ecstatic and asked when I could grab them or meet to pick them up. He replied and said that he had a few other inquiries, so I would need to send the payment via PayPal, and then we could schedule a time to meet up. He was okay with using PayPal goods and services, so I knew my money would be protected if he was trying to scam me. I quickly sent the payment, and he confirmed that it was received. He said that he could send the tickets virtually or provide the physical copy of the tickets if that was preferred, and since it was a gift, I asked if he could meet up for the physical copies, and he said he had no problem with that. We made a plan to meet at a local grocery store at about 8 p.m. so I could get the tickets. I showed up a little early and parked in the back left of the lot as we agreed to. About 50 minutes later, an old Marin Oldsmobile pulled up and sat a few spaces away from my car. I wasn't sure if it was Victor or not, so I just waited. After about 5 minutes, the door to the other car opened, and I asked, "Hey, are you Victor?" And they responded, "Yes. Hi, thank you, I appreciate you buying these for me. Here are your tickets." Now, we small-talked for about a minute or so, and I thanked him and said that they were for my wife's birthday, and we both went our separate ways. I wrapped them up in a box for my wife and gave them to her for her birthday, and she was so excited that we would be going to the concert just a few short weeks later. We get to the concert, and everything was amazing. The seats have a really great view, we've already grabbed some drinks, and we're having a fantastic time. About 15 minutes into one of the opening acts, someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, great to see you." And I kid you not, it was Victor. I was like, "Oh, hey, what's going on?" And he responds, "Sorry I'm a little late, the traffic was crazy." Victor reached across me and put his hand out to introduce himself to my wife and said, "I'm really glad you can make it." My wife, who was polite enough, didn't say anything to me immediately, but after saying hello and introducing herself, she pulled me aside and asked who that was. I told her it was the guy that I bought the tickets from. I didn't know that he was going to be there. I thought he was just selling the tickets. Now listen, Victor seemed like a really nice guy, and I had no problem sitting next to him for the entire show while my wife took the aisle seat, but some of his comments throughout the night were pretty confusing. He was making it seem like we had all made this plan to go together, and that we were a group of friends just hanging out. I was polite and tried to answer him every time he said something, but there was definitely a few times that I just tuned it out and enjoyed the show and made sure my wife was having a good time. Anytime he would say, "I'm really glad we got together," or something weird like that, I would just give him a half smile and sort of nod. Clearly, there was something wrong with this Victor guy. My wife was having a blast, though, and that's what was important to me. As the concert grew to a close, Victor leaned over to both of us and said, "What's next? What do we got planned for the rest of the night?" My wife looked at me confused, and I said, "Hey, I appreciate you selling us the tickets, but we're gonna head home. Have a great night, alright?" I got up and grabbed my jacket as my wife did the same. We started to walk up the aisle, and I felt something grab my arm. It was Victor. And before he could say anything, I said, "Hey, what's wrong with you? I don't even know you, man. Why don't you just leave us alone, alright?" At that moment, I was pretty angry, and after a night of appeasing a complete stranger's notions, I think my patience had grown a little thin. But as we left, I felt bad and regretted having yelled at him. It was pretty late, and my wife and I decided to grab some food on the way home and eat it on the couch before bed. The next few weeks went on as normal. My wife and I were both busy with work and had a ton of things to do around the house with any free time that we had. I remember going to bed really early one night and trying to read to fall asleep when I got a Facebook alert on my phone. It was a message from Victor saying, "Hey, I had a nice time at the concert with you and your wife. I'm sorry if I overstepped, but I'd like to get a chance to, get to know you both better." I deleted that message and I blocked his account instantly. I was now creeped out. I didn't really use social media all that much, and this was why. Weird people on the internet. I'm gonna be honest. The message creeped me out, and it was on my mind a lot over the following days. But eventually, as all things do, it began fading slowly from my mind. About 6 or 7 weeks after the concert, my wife and I were sitting on the couch, messing with our phones, and our dog started going absolutely crazy as there was a loud pounding on the door. Outside of a few immediate family members, we never have anyone over as our Akita is old and not the best at meeting new people. I told my wife to stay where she was, and I would go through the garage to see who it was. As I opened the garage and went towards the front door, my heart sank. I saw that it was the weirdo from Facebook Marketplace, Victor. And I was at a loss for words. But I think I finally muttered out something like, "What the hell are you doing here?" He said something along the lines of, I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have showed up unannounced, but I have tickets for next week. The show, and I thought you and your wife might want to go." He had a huge and uncomfortable looking smile on his face. I asked him how the hell he knew where I lived, and he said he got it from the PayPal transaction. I told him that if he ever came to my house or my family again, I'd call the cops and let him meet my 200-pound dogs that he could hear going crazy inside the house. His smile turned to a frown, and he said, "We'll see," and walked away. I took a few moments outside to collect myself and went back inside. My wife asked me who that was, and I told her it was just UPS and that I got another package. For the next few nights, and even weeks, I felt like something was off. I noticed the motion lights going on more frequently. I felt like I heard scratching or creaking outside of doors and windows, but I chalked it all up to the idea that I was just hypersensitive and hyper-focused on some psycho showing up in my house. Thankfully, we hadn't had any additional incidents or run-ins with Victor, but I know that I will never buy anything from Facebook ever again. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. EST, and super fun live streams happen every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night, and I'd love to see you there. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let'sReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, communism kills.